Welcome back to the Joust About Careers podcast. This is the place to learn about careers from the people who are actually doing the work every day. I'm your host, Brian Bratt, and this week's guest is 1999 Van Buren graduate Abby Yates, a clinical supervisor and mental health counselor at the Willow Center. In this episode, Abby shares how a typical day looks in her position, how mental health professionals often don't have the luxury of a consistent 9-to-5 work schedule, why mental health professionals transition to new positions so often, and much more. Whether you are interested in a career as a mental health professional or are still exploring your options, I hope that what Abby shares today will help all of you make better career decisions and have fulfilling career journeys. Enjoy the show. Abby, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how a typical day looks for a clinical supervisor and mental health counselor.
Well, that kind of depends on the day and where you work. So my current role is in a private practice. So I go to work, I sit in a chair, people come in, they see me, we talk for an hour and then they leave. I do a fair amount of telehealth sessions, so I can do those either from my home or for the office, and that is same kind of feeling, but it's through a screen. But if you are in a hospital setting, it can be very different because you are dealing with admissions and discharges and medication passes, and you have groups that need to be done and treatment team meetings. And so those days are a lot more chaotic because there are so many more moving parts and pieces. It's not one person at a time. It's 5 people at a time. It also makes a difference if you are an office-based person or a community-based person. So obviously office-based, you work in an office, community-based, you work in the community. So for those folks, it is sometimes meeting people literally where they're at, in their homes, at a doctor's appointment, with their probation officer, helping them through a job interview. It really just depends on the job, the day, the situation, because kind of much like being an educator, you can go into work thinking that a day is going to be a certain kind of way, and then curveball, and now everything's out the window and you have to deal with the situation, and you get to be done when the situation is done.
So really not set hours for you. There may be times where you're working well beyond 5 o'clock.
Oh, I work well beyond 5 o'clock, at least 3-4 nights a week. Okay. For the first, I've had 3 jobs where I was like a level 3 snow emergency. We don't care. You still need to show up. So those jobs have been off hours, evenings, weekends, holidays. You don't get to pick. That's your shift. That's when you work. So that is also a thing to take into consideration. I've worked in 2 different hospital settings and a jail. So those are, we will get the sheriff to come and get you to come to work.
That's interesting. Does every jail have a mental health counselor of some kind working there, or is that as needed?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not 100% sure. I know that I worked for a company that contracted with a jail. So I was employed through that company, not directly through the sheriff's department. In my personal professional opinion, I believe that there should be mental health providers, case managers in corrections institutions to not just help individuals cope with the transition from the community to incarceration, but also help them transition back into the community. There's a lot of work that can be done to help lower reoffense rates by providing education and life skills. I wish that there was more, but I'm not in charge.
Right. And everything always comes down to money. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you have a very interesting day-to-day experience. And when you were in high school, getting ready to graduate from Van Buren, did you have any idea that this is what you would be doing? And what were your plans upon graduation?
I enrolled at BGSU to be a history teacher. And I ended up graduating from the University of Findlay with a degree in history with plans to go to law school. And now I do this.
So what happened? What led to those changes?
To be perfectly honest, when I was in college, I struggled with anxiety a lot. And I got some really not good care and I got some really good care. And at no point when I was learning how to cope, learning about coping skills, learning about how to manage my stress and anxiety, never once did I thought, oh my gosh, I could totally do this. It was just kind of a thing that people kept telling me that I should do. Wow, Abby, you're really easy to talk to. Wow, Abby, you give really great advice. You should maybe do this for a living. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And 18 years later, I am still doing it.
You obviously, like you said, took a roundabout way to get to where you are. If you were to do all of this over again, would you do it differently? Do you feel like there was anything in your bachelor's degree that has helped you as a mental health professional, or would you ever say that time was wasted, or was there good that came out of it?
Um, Actually, weirdly, it has been incredibly helpful. Learning about, like, taking a history class, you're learning about people and what impacts how they live, how they interact with one another. So you have not just changes politically, but you have a religious component, and then, how two different groups of people interact poorly or positively. And so having that background of being able to look at a person, I guess, globally, at like from 30,000 feet. I often will do an exercise. My first therapy session after I do their intake assessment, I will ask them to tell me their story, where I will say, tell me what you know about how your parents grew up, how your parents were parented, because how they were parented influences how they parented you, which influences how you are now and how you interacted. So I like to go back as far as possible and get any little nuggets or anything, because it really does help give me insight as to their personal and family culture, to understand how to best help them. So if they are a person who loves differently than me, or prays differently than me, or has a different frame of reference than me, I need to know that so that I can tailor interventions and conversations more toward what they need and meet them where they're at.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I've not thought about how, yeah, literally you are digging into their histories and using that to hopefully help and so forth. That is
Yeah.
really interesting.
It's a difficult thing. And the way that I explain it to my clients is, like, people aren't broken, so they don't need fixed. I look at a person like a puzzle and not a problem. And so they come with all their pieces, but we don't have the picture on the box. We just really have to just kind of sit there and kind of figure it out. And it's a really rewarding experience to sit shotgun while I get to watch somebody achieve their goals. It's great.
That's awesome. Oftentimes we hear the words counselor and therapist. Are those interchangeable, or are there differences between those two words?
It really is a personal preference. Counselor, therapist. Therapist is more of a umbrella term, like therapy, therapist. So that's a thing. And then there are counselors, and then there are social workers. So which is 2 different tracks educationally, 2 different tracks license-wise. So I am a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervisory status. I have a master's of arts in mental health counseling. So I am a counselor. I do therapy. But when somebody asks me what I do, I usually say that I'm a therapist. And then I'm, of course, asked like, oh, physical therapist. No, mental health. And then they go, oh.
You've worked in a variety of environments. You already mentioned that a little bit. Do you prefer one of those environments over the others, or are there any major differences that a person should know about if they were considering working in a specific environment as a mental health counselor professional?
It really, again, is a personal preference thing. But it is super important for a person going into a job to really understand who they are, what they need to feel safe in an environment, and what isn't good. So I know that I have worked in very dangerous environments where I've worked in corrections, I've worked in lockdown units, and corrections was the safest place I've ever worked, weirdly. And I worked at a children's psych unit and I had a kid break my ribs. So it is really just a thing that you have to be aware of, just like anything. So obviously office-based, community-based, there's that. Working in a group where you are the one person in the room that's in charge and you might have 20 people in there. It depends on the organization. It depends on your role. It depends on the demographics that you serve. It depends on where you are at in your career. I've been doing this long enough that, I mean, I'll go work anywhere. My foundations can't be shaken at this point. So, but the most vulnerable I feel is actually in my current job, where it's just me and another person in a room. And sometimes we're the only 2 people in the office. And things can happen, thankfully, knocking on wood. I've been pretty lucky. So I only had that one time, and that was first year of my career. Lesson learned. Don't get into a power struggle with a kid. Don't do that.
Good advice for teachers also.
Yes. Yep.
I have a lot of students who are interested in mental health careers. And again, I think that it's something that is talked about much more today than it was 20, 30 years ago. And I think students have that desire to help others and so forth. But it's very, very hard for students to get those experiences because of the confidential nature of this career. Are there any opportunities that you know of and can share for students who are interested in exploring mental health careers that might allow them to at least get their feet wet a little bit before they graduate and have to start spending a lot of time and money working toward that?
Absolutely. And it really does depend on where you work and what the organization's policies are about stuff like that. For the most part, any prospective mental health professional will be welcomed in to something to a certain degree. Obviously, a high school student is not going to be able to sit in on a session, but they can probably, sit with somebody and have an interview or speak with them directly about their job. Maybe I have participated in a shadowing situation where I pretended to be a client and the person who was being shadowed was the therapist, and we kind of acted out, like worst case scenario situation. But
right.
When a student is then in college, there's usually internship or practicum potential. So that is usually, you just have to sign a confidentiality thing. One of the best parts about my job is once we're licensed, we become what we call gatekeepers for the profession. So We are encouraged to help bring people along. We are encouraged to welcome in students, prospective mental health professionals, but we also do then police each other as well, which is a whole other thing. So if you have a student who wants to shadow, have them start working the phone, just start calling people, and the worst they can tell you is no. Right. And then you keep going, and they can contact me, and I will either have them meet with me, or I will set them up with one of my amazing colleagues or one of my lots and lots and lots of professional relationships that I've built over the years.
And that's good to know that students do have those opportunities, because that's very useful. So as they start thinking about this career, what's an aspect of this career that you think they absolutely have to be aware of before they start down this career path?
You are not going to get rich doing this job. The pay structure is dependent on insurance reimbursement. So unfortunately, for most roles, you need to have a master's degree to get the certain kind of license to do certain things. So obviously that's undergrad, and then usually 2 years of graduate school. And then you're not looking at a high pay. Most professionals who work in this career usually have a second or a third job in the beginning until they work up to the experience level to get to a place where they don't need it. Like a lot of jobs, you have to work your way up. But getting out of college, getting out of graduate school, and thinking that you're going to be making $75,000 doing this job is just not realistic. The other thing that is important to understand is that most people's resumes, and I'm sure you saw it, we are moving all over the place. We are moving and grooving and transitioning from job to job to job. Usual lifespan in a job is anywhere from 18 months to 3 years. And that's because we burn out. But it also has everything to do with professional development. We have to do CEUs. We have to renew our license every 2 years. There are, certifications that you can pick up along the way through your CEUs, which make you eligible for the next job, makes you eligible for the promotion. So we are incentivized to get more letters after our name, pick up more fancy papers so that we can do other things and work other places. But it also is a really good way to diversify yourself from another applicant. In terms of my license, I am at the top of my field. I can't get another license. So I'm stacking up certifications, because in the event that I change jobs, which I have no intention of doing, I really like my job currently, I want to be able to be a standout on paper. And that means certifications. We never stop learning. The other thing that's very important is that most mental health professionals do have to carry an additional liability insurance. Like doctors, we can get in trouble personally if one of our clients are harmed. So we usually have to carry a liability insurance. It really does depend on where you work as well. Like my current company, I don't have to do it because I work for a private practice. The practice is covered. It is always a good idea to have your own, though, just in case. So the job part of it is actually pretty easy. It's all the other stuff that makes it really complicated.
Right. And like you said, and with any job, there are the positives and there are the negatives. And it's very clear that you love your job, but no job is absolutely perfect. So there are those things that students need to be aware of. If you were a student sitting in high school right now and you had an hour to start preparing for a career, whether it is in the mental health field or something else, where would you spend that hour?
I thought a lot about this question, and I figured that the easiest thing to do is to figure out what you don't want to do. There are certain demographics that I don't want to work with. I have a soft spot for the elderly. I'm not working in a nursing home. I can't, I'll cry all day. I've worked with kids, like kids, very, very, very troubled kids. I'm a mom. I can't work with kids right now. I need to leave something in the tank for when I get home at the end of the day. And so it's really just about searching yourself and finding out what you don't want to do, and then going completely to the other side and like, what is your passion? What are you good at? What have other people told you that you're good at? And sometimes it's okay. I wrote this down, like, don't be afraid to just have a job while you figure it out. Like, it is okay. I took, I guess the cool kids call it a gap year after undergrad, where I just had a job. I cut grass. I worked at a gym. Like, I just had a job. That's okay.
Right.
Because
that's a great point.
I don't want to cut grass for a living and I don't want to work at a gym.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, that there's nothing wrong with getting experience. I mean, experience is such a great teacher. And if students don't know what they want to do, that's okay. Go get some experience. And like you said, that's going to help them narrow that down. Yeah, that's really good. As you think about your life and everything that you've learned on your career journey, what would you say is the thing that you wish you, the thing you know now that you wish you had known when you were back in high school?
Well, to take a completely unserious side quest, thanks to TikTok, I now know that teaching baby otters how to swim is a job, and I didn't know that that was a job, and I feel like I've been personally victimized by the lack of that information. But I feel like now, as I get to watch young people turn into grownups, which is great. Careers are very different. Like, what I think about a career, what I was raised to believe a career is you work a job, that same job, until you retire. And that's just not realistic for a lot of people. And that's why I specifically mentioned that with this profession, if you find a person who has worked in the same role for like more than 5 years, they're a unicorn. They are a mythical being. You just never see it. But, and also I think there is a different view of certain jobs, where now trades, it's like the trades are something that's really super popular. I never thought about in the 90s that trades were a career for women and girls. Now there's a lot of women and girls in trades and in STEM. So the box that you is so much bigger that, and if you want to think outside of it, it's harder to get out of it because there are so many more options. And what I do love about the way careers are being viewed, people aren't completely sacrificing their lives to their jobs, and work-life balance is so much more prioritized. And so as much as I love my career, I'm so blessed to have found it. Sometimes I don't like my job. And so I think it really just is a lot about trial and error, not being afraid to say, you know what, this just wasn't a good fit for me. I'm going to go. And not losing hope that just because you're 26, that's how old I was when I started graduate school, that I'm going to not be successful because I haven't figured out what my passion is. That it is okay to take that time and figure it out and be young and have fun and explore and travel while you're figuring this out. If you're going to find a career, you need to hopefully make sure it's the right one. But then also, it's okay at any age to say, I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go do something else. That sounds fun.
Yeah, that idea that, like you said, it's never too late to start something new. and it's always okay to change. And I guess as I get closer and closer to retirement, I think about, I don't think I'm going to sit in a chair all day, every day as a retiree. I want to get out there and continue to do things and learn. And that's where life is fun. I would agree with you on that. So, Abby, very insightful. I know there's a lot of students that are going to benefit from hearing your story because they are interested in going into that mental health field. So I greatly appreciate it. And good
Welcome.
luck to you as you continue on your career journey.
Thank you.
If you liked this Joust About Careers episode, you can explore previous episodes and highlights to learn about even more careers of Van Buren graduates. To be sure you don't miss upcoming episodes, please click subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you'll know when the next episode is released. Thank you for spending a portion of your day with us, and we hope you will continue to prepare for your future by learning just about careers.